annihilation. The propaganda talks only of victories, especially in the early years.
The Wehrmacht had unbelievable successes that they showed in the newsreels. We saw huge prisoner of war camps with hundreds of thousands of captured Russians, 600,000 near Kiev, stretching all the way to the horizon. And then the cold Russian winter arrived. We knew that people couldn't survive at 35 below zero in the open. There were hundreds of thousands of them, millions. And that was a life-changing experience for me. I said to myself, no, I don't want to be part of this war. I don't want to be part of the crimes. I don't want to kill anyone. I simply want to live.
Ludwig Baumann is a sailor serving on the French Atlantic coast. The killing, horror and hardship of the Eastern Front are a long way from occupied France. Occupation troops and units transferred from the Russian front for a rest enjoy peaceful times here, part of the reality of World War II. But Ludwig Baumann can't forget the brutal face of war in the East. For many, desertion is the only way to resist. Ludwig Baumann and a friend dare to do what others see as impossible or dishonorable.
We
broke into the armory and took handguns and ammunition. Then we left the ship. It was a sort of floating barracks that we could leave in the evenings. The French were waiting around the corner with a truck. We got in the truck and they drove us to the border and then drove back that night.
They flee to unoccupied Vichy France. They don't need to use their weapons. But they don't get far. At the frontier, they walk straight into a German border patrol. Ludwig Baumann and his friend are court-martialed for desertion.
We were sentenced to death in Bordeaux. The trial took 40 minutes. I was tortured during the interrogation and then in my cell on death row because I didn't betray my French friends, and neither did my friend. After 7 weeks, my sentence was reduced to 12 years in prison. But they didn't tell us, because there were other charges against us. I was on death row for 10 months. My hands and feet were chained night and day. Every morning when the guards changed, I thought, they're coming to get us. And when they passed the cell, I knew I was safe for another day. It was so dreadful that the trauma is still with me today.
Waiting on death row. German deserters share this fate with many Frenchmen. With the French resistance so active against German occupying forces, suspects are regularly brought before the courts. Death sentences are frequently passed, even on the innocent. And hostages are frequently executed in retaliation for the attacks of the resistance. These so-called measures of atonement are announced on posters. Corporal Kurt Helke finds them deeply disturbing.
In any case, these announcements, or rather the reports of the executions of the French resistance fighters, who were labeled terrorists, troubled me deeply. They made me think about what was happening, whether or not I could square it in my own mind with my own beliefs, if I could condone it.
For the time being, Kurt Helke continues to do his duty in Paris. But the time is coming when he will have to make a decision.
It could rebound on me any day. I could find myself standing in front of a group of Frenchmen who are fighting for their freedom, and I would have to shoot them. That was intolerable.
Almost 4,000 hostages are executed in France, and almost 70,000 Frenchmen are deported to concentration camps. Crimes against the civilian population didn't only take place in the occupied Soviet Union. Since the middle of February 1942, Karl Heinrich von Stülpnagel has been military commander in France, the same general, educated in the humanities, who joined the plot against Hitler in 1938 and who resigned his post on the Eastern Front in 1941. But he still dutifully serves the Hitler regime. For some months, until an SS officer in Paris takes over the task in June 1942, he's also responsible for the execution of hostages. He signs death sentences and has Jews deported. Karl-Heinrich von Struppnagel's son comments on the controversial role his father played.
According to Hitler's instructions, 570 hostages should have been shot in those 3 months. Only 177 were shot.
Kurt Helke finally makes a definite choice. As a teletype operator at the Navy's Western Command in Paris, he and 2 comrades form a resistance cell. The group has ties to the French resistance. Helke is given pamphlets calling for an end to the war. He distributes them everywhere German soldiers are to be found.
We handed them out however we could, in soldiers' barracks and soldiers' cinemas. We left them in vehicles and in parked trucks. If the window was a bit open, we would throw them in. And because the metro was used a lot by the soldiers, we put them in the metro.
Opposition from below. A handful of men and women who can't guess that General Karl-Heinrich von Struppnagel, their commanding officer in Paris, is pursuing goals similar to theirs. Even while he's still responsible for the execution of French hostages, he's in contact with the resistance within the Wehrmacht. They are still plotting Hitler's overthrow in spite of all the failures, and the driving force of the conspiracy is Colonel Henning Von Tresckow. In the summer of 1943, he's temporarily transferred to Berlin. In the capital city, he makes further contacts with the civilian resistance and like-minded officers. Since September 1943, Klaus Schenk Graf von Stauffenberg is one of them. He's a staff officer in the Reserve Army, based in their central Berlin headquarters, the Bendler Block. All of the troops that are not at the front belong to the Reserve Army, among them the powerful occupying forces in France. At this time, Tresckow's office is also located in the Bendler Block. In the staff of the Reserve Army, Stauffenberg is responsible for writing emergency orders for the entire force. The code word Valkyrie will trigger their dispatch from Berlin as emergency measures to quell domestic unrest. Stauffenberg and Tresckow change the orders. The new version authorizes the Reserve Army to march against the SS and every party office, even in the occupied territories, should Hitler be assassinated. In June 1944, Allied troops land in Normandy. Military defeat is imminent. The conspirators are forced to act. Henning von Tresckow is promoted to Major General and is transferred back to the Eastern Front in command of a division. In his new position, he's unable to intervene in the plot in Berlin. But since the invasion, he's been urging the others to act. There's not much time left. There are still far too few conspirators, but that's not what matters to Tresckow. He says,
"The assassination must take place, whatever the cost. The essential point is not the practical aim, but that the German resistance dared to take the decisive gamble before the world and before history."
Words of a lonely hero. But there is a practical aim. Only Hitler's death can secure a truce with the Western Allies and allow the Eastern Front to be held. Hitler is at his headquarters, the Wolf's Lair. Stauffenberg decides to plant the bomb himself. Then he'll fly back to Berlin to direct the coup d'etat.